Hi, I'm Jerry Matthews from the Bukwas crew. You know, in every endeavor, there are those who excel in their chosen field. These individuals become the gold standard, blazing a trail for those who would come after. Now, in Sasquatch investigations and research, these people could probably be counted on one hand. Some months ago, myself, Thomas, Leo, and Bill had the privilege of talking with an individual who stood out even among that handful of gold standard achievers. It was an easygoing, relaxed conversation about past research and the future of investigations with none other than Rick Noll. So, coming in at number 2 on the Summer Sizzle series, we have an interview with the one and only Rick Noll. Oh, enjoy. This is the Bukwas crew. Folks, we got a great treat for you in this episode. He started his field research back in 1969, which was a decade before our own Thomas Steenburg. He's a heavyweight in the Bigfoot world, believe me. And I will take odds that if you threw up a name from the Bigfoot community, then this guy has either worked with them or for them at one point in time. He was and continues to be a go-to guy in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm speaking about none other than Rick Noll. Now, if you have not heard of Rick Noll, well, let me tell you, you do not know the subject of Bigfoot half as well as you thought you did. I can also tell you that in spite of my couple of decades experience studying the Sasquatch phenomenon, these guys, Thomas and Rick, make me feel like a newbie on the subject. I can't wait to have these guys speak. So without further ado, let's bring my co-hosts out here right now. And we have Mr. Bill Reed. How you doing, Bill?
Oh, pretty good. Yourself?
Not too bad.
I'm really looking forward to today's. I've never had the opportunity to meet Rick. I've looked forward to this for a long time. So glad we're finally able to do this.
It's going to be a real treat, man. It is going to be a real treat. And also the irrepressible Thomas Steenburg. Hello, Thomas.
Hello, Jerry. How are you today?
I am good. And unlike other podcasts that ramble on for 15 minutes talking about nothing, the Bukwas crew like to jump into it right away. You came to hear the guests, not us. And so without any further ado, I will give you Mr. Rick Noll. Hello, Rick.
Howdy.
I'm glad you could make it. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and so has Bill, as he just said. So now, Rick, I've been a follower of yours since, late 90s, early 2000s. Back in the day, I regularly posted on Bigfoot forums as Grand Cherokee, and you would post there as a damn dirty ape. And I learned a lot from reading your posts, man, about how to set up your own research area and how to make superior track castings, etc., like that. So when I started these podcasts, I could think of God, he's up there in the top 3 people that I want to have on this podcast. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about you. Now, I read that you were initiated into the world of Bigfoot by stories that you heard from friends and family, and they would do so as to distract you from dwelling on a traumatic incident which occurred when you were young.
Yep.
And is that accurate? Is that how you first heard about Bigfoot?
Yeah, it is. I had a cousin that was working on one of the bridges out of Happy Camp in Northern California. And he was a rebar construction worker. So he was the foreman. He could say what was going on. And he brought his son and myself and my brother to the area to stay for a week. And it was in '69. It was at the time just a week before the moon landing. So I remember that distinctly because of the moon landing. And we stayed on the Klamath River camping. And one day, my brother wanted and my cousin wanted to go and fish at the river. They brought their fishing poles, and I said, "Yeah, fine." My cousin was up on the bridge, and he was talking about later in the week that he was going to have me try and lift some of this rebar. That rebar is like 135 pounds per person on their shoulder. And it takes 2 people to lift some of that stuff. It's and then walk into the grid that they tie it together. Yeah. 10 by 10 grid on top of the bridge before they pour the concrete. So I wasn't really looking forward to it, but it would, it'd be interesting to see what I could do. And my brother and my cousin said they wanted to go across the river on the other side where we were camped, and they decided they found a spot where they could walk across. So I'm sitting on the side of the river reading a book, and I see them walking across, and all of a sudden they fell. The rocks slipped underneath their feet, and they started going down the river. And I knew there was a waterfall a little bit further down, so I was really scared, and I just picked up an axe and to use as a cane and ran across that river. I don't know how I did it, but I got across. They didn't. I didn't spend very much time with my feet on the actual rocks. It was going so fast. Got on the other side, came back into the river and held the axe out and pulled my cousin out, and then raced down the river again. Got out and raced down the river bank on the opposite side, and went back out in the water, and it took me 2 times to get the axe handle out to my brother, and finally pulled him out. And when I pulled him out, everything was gone. He was stark naked. The water had ripped off all of his clothes, his shoes. He was bloody, and all the fishing gear was gone. And we had to walk back around down to the bridge where they were working and walk across the bridge, and everybody was wondering, who are they and what was going on. And my cousin told them. I guess it was my second cousin that was in the water with my brother, because it was his son. I think that's a second cousin, right? And so I had nightmares about that he died in that river. And I guess to get my mind off of it, it didn't work, hauling some of that rebar. I fell a couple of times. So they started telling me stories to get my mind off of it. And they were Bigfoot stories. And there was some interesting ones, about finding great big barrels turned over, rolled down the hills. Some people were camped right at the edge of one of these depots for the fuel for the graders and for the forklifts that they were using. And they said that there was some activity outside of the vehicle and banging on the vehicle. They were afraid that it was a bear or something. And nobody said that they actually saw the creature, but they found a lot of footprints and stuff. Not while I was there, but that's how I got the information to start with.
Well, Rick, when you became a researcher, how were people able to get in touch with you to tell their stories? I mean, were you like Thomas? Did you advertise in the newspaper? Bigfoot encounter? Call me.
No,
Call Saul.
no, no. It was just word of mouth at the very beginning, and then I hooked up with Grover Krantz, not Grover Krantz, Dick Grover, and he had some sort of a network where he would get information, and he would pass stuff off on to me when things happen. He came to my house a couple of times. It was right up the street from Five Fights Drive, where he had his famous bent sign on the side of the road that he picked up. A girl and a guy, two teenagers that were in a truck, claimed that a Bigfoot crossed in front of them and hit the sign.
Wow.
And, so I lived up the street from where that was, and I met with him. Went down to Olympia when they were trying to change the state animal for Bigfoot and recognize it as a real animal. Grover was at the beginning of that, and then I went to college. Well, first I got in the military, and I was in the Coast Guard. But when I came back, I went into Green River Community College, and formed a after hours group there on Bigfoot research, and hooked up with David Smith, who we worked quite a lot together, and went on a couple of trips down to Mount St. Helens. And then I hooked up with Peter Byrne, and Peter Byrne started funneling stuff into the college to me, and then we would go out and investigate stuff. And then Rene Dahinden and John Green both heard about it and started funneling stuff into me as well for area stuff that was happening in the areas that I was mainly focused on, which is Washington.
You see, the reason I ask that is I want to make a comparison between your American experience and, say, Thomas's Canadian experience. And being from two different cultures. Now, you say that it flowed to you, it came to you, this information, whereas Thomas had to beat the bushes and practically pay people to talk to him about Sasquatch.
Right.
So
yeah, I had a lot of people, they didn't have a real interest in it, but they were curious that I was associated with a college somehow, and would give me information. And then after that, I hooked up with Bob Walls, who's now a cultural anthropologist back east, and he got married to a very rich lady, candy manufacturing, something like Hershey's or something like that. Mm-hmm. But he was going to the University of Washington, and I helped him with his research paper, his thesis about how loggers in the Pacific Northwest treated the subject of Bigfoot and how it could affect their livelihood, and how they were reluctant to talk about it, even though there was a lot of researchers going behind the loggers' backs and going directly to Weyerhaeuser and asking them to put it in their newsletter, which I got several copies of the newsletters that they sent out, and asking for people to come forward and talk about Bigfoot that they may have seen out on the job. This is before the spotted owl, and so they didn't really understand what could happen. But the loggers were pretty intense people. You didn't want to call them out or anything. You wanted to, whatever they said, you believed. Otherwise, you were in for it. But yeah, so it pretty much flowed to me because I think it was the association with Peter and college.
Mm-hmm. Now, Thomas, you got just the opposite kind of thing. Like I said, you had a big bower and swindle people to even mention Sasquatch. Nobody wanted anything to do with the subject.
Basically, but I must point out I never paid anybody a dime. So.
Okay, it's official.
Yeah.
You didn't pay anyone. Fine. Rick, tell me, you're a professional photographer, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of photography and video work for Boeing right now. And also I've worked with Doug Hychek and White Wolf Productions and a couple other network productions that he was working.
So can you tell me how it is that the Bigfoot world is awash with blurry, out of focus, off-centered pictures of blob squatches? Is it operator error, mechanical malfunction, or purposeful hoaxes? I want to know, why is there never a qualified photographer in an area where there is a Bigfoot?
Well, who got the best picture so far of a Bigfoot?
What would you say, Thomas?
If you don't get this right, Jerry, I'm going to hold this over your head forever. I want you to answer his question.
Who took the best picture?
Yeah.
Image of a Sasquatch so far.
Well, if they exist, probably the Patterson Gimlin film.
Yeah.
If they exist.
If he had gotten that
If they
wrong.
don't exist. Well, when he said picture, I said, has anyone ever taken a good picture?
Those are movie pictures, but yeah. So he practiced and practiced and practiced. He was like practicing with a holster with the camera coming out. Really, it was fluid. He had a search image in his head that if he saw one, he was pulling his camera out. That's what he was going to do. He wasn't going to freak out. He was preparing himself totally for seeing one. And so he practiced with that little thigh holster and with that camera sitting in there. And he didn't even own the camera.
No, he rented it. Matter of fact, they issued a warrant for his arrest when they failed to return it.
So people, when they pick up a camera, with film, it's one thing. It's expensive. Okay, you don't pick up a camera and shoot unless you're a professional, because it costs money to get it developed and the film and all that. But digital, you should be shooting everything. You should be really practicing and to not be afraid. And I know that he went to the zoo a lot and practiced there. He was practicing on horseback, which is what his preference was for, out in the woods for transportation. And so that's really what it's all about, is preparing yourself and that search image that he had. And then when he went on trips, that's what it was all about. It was he wasn't down on the ground tracking. He wasn't listening for anything really. He was just riding his horse, because you can't really hear anything on a horseback. Can't really see good tracks on a horseback. I mean, maybe Native Americans could, but like maybe Gimlin could. I'm not sure, but that's pretty far away from the ground to look at tracks. You'd have to get back down onto the ground to check, and that gets tiring if you do that 20 times in a day. So they're just riding around, and they're waiting for something to jump out at them. Now, I had a mountain lion jump out at me on a horseback. I wasn't prepared for that, and that got me thinking. What happened if that would have been a Bigfoot that jumped out and not a cat? Same thing.
Yeah, because you only possibly will only get about 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Of time to take a picture. I mean, even my cell, it would take about, if it was to have to be turned on and ready to go, we're talking about 25, 30 seconds, Even a one-legged frog could cross the road faster than that. So you got to have the camera primed and ready to go. They say, the best thing to do is just take a picture of anything. Get used to taking pictures of birds. Take a picture of a squirrel. Take a picture of whatever.
And the other thing is, and I beat Thomas up about this all the time because he's being stubborn about it. But
cool.
things like dash cameras. Like if you're driving around the back roads looking for Sasquatch, have a good quality dash cam. They're digital. You put a good card in it, and you leave that running. Yeah, it's not the best picture, but if something runs out, at least you have something. And if you have time to stop, and that's not a dash cam. That gets you 2 hours at most. And same as if you're out hiking. You know, the guys with the action cameras that are running. So
just use this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even with that, you've got to get it on. Where if you've got an action camera strapped on your shoulder or on your hat that's always running, even when you're going to grab your other cameras, at least you've got that footage. And I think that's one of the big advantages that we have today is we have the ability to have a digital camera running basically all the time that doesn't cost anything. I mean, I can remember being a kid with my dad with his giving me his little Super 8 film, and going hunting, and every 3 or 4 minutes you're there trying to reload it because you've used up the film on nothing, and then having to wait until you send it out, get it processed, and you find out all these great shots that you thought you had. You had a magpie that you can barely see on it because of the focal length on the lens. So I think
I mean, I side by side, and I always have a camera running on the front of the side by side. It's usually good for 2 hours before it'll start recording over again.
The point is, it's continuous, though.
Continuous, yes. As long as the ignition is on, that's on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Bill said, that's the only problem with this Air Pro is it's 2 hours, but once it's full, you got to download it or erase it in order to get it to go again. It's not continuous, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But still, in all, it's rather curious with all the cameras that are out there, and everybody has a camera these days, that there hasn't been a single decent picture taken. And even if there was a single picture taken, do you think you'd be able to get away with saying this is actually a Sasquatch before somebody says, no, it's CGI or it's been tampered with or blah, blah, blah?
Well, they say the same thing about the PG film. There's still a lot of people who say it's a guy in a suit. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still got Bill Miller's tree cameras here that take the 36 roll of 35 millimeter.
35
film.
millimeter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He also had a Super 8 video camera.
Mm-hmm. That he preferred over digital because digital could be too suspect. So,
well, it's either or. I mean, you get one of today's modern 4K cameras, and if you were out there and you got a really good shot with a 4K camera that was fairly close, I mean, it would be hard to argue with it, especially if you have it in a raw data film where you can give it to experts to look at it and see that it's not being digitally touched. And I think if that's where we're going, we all think of the Photoshop and that, but if you're recording in raw, and Rick, you know far more about it than I do. If you have that basic data in there, you can see if it's an original shot or not.
Yeah, the metadata on there is, pretty foolproof.
Yeah, that doesn't lie. That doesn't lie.
If you look at what NASA's doing on Mars, they're looking for life. And they've got cameras, and there's got a whole bunch of people coming on and seeing rats and lizards and fish and all sorts of things on the surface. And they're just imagining what they're seeing.
Really?
It just looks like it. It's not like it's really there.
Faces in the clouds. Yeah.
Right. But NASA is not saying that they're going to find life with photography. You're not going to find, if there was life on another planet, they'd want to either capture it or get other types of evidence. And on another planet, it would be the byproducts left by it. What kind of gases are left and stuff like that, trace elements left behind. So photography might not be the entire answer that you're looking for. I mean, it's one of the things, but and just being prepared for yourself to see one and you see anyone, is not going to convince anybody either. It's probably what Grover and John Green always said, and Rene, is that, you got to have a body.
Mm-hmm.
It's what basically the scientific community has always claimed. There's only one way to prove the existence of Sasquatch, and that's when they get what they've always demanded: a body or a piece of body or sufficient skeletal remains.
Yeah.
And that's just how it works, and no amount of political collect wishful thinking will ever change it.
I mean, right now we've got some DNA stuff and everything. It just keeps on coming back. That it's as close to human as it should be. It must have been human, because it got nothing else that's that close that isn't human.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA. I've got Owen Caddy went on a trip up to Marysville, and because we got a report, and some guy walked out on his back porch, and that's where they put the refrigerator and a lot of little cabins out there because there's no room inside. And there was a light bulb there, and the Sasquatch came up and hit the light bulb with his head and left blood. We collected the blood, and it went to Todd Distel, and he said, well, that was Jane Goodall, because that's the last person I tested, and it was as close to Jane Goodall as it is anything. So it's the same thing. DNA, until we have DNA and find out that it's only 1% different than human, we don't know what kind of DNA we're looking for, or what the DNA that we collect is.
Well, is it because you don't have that prime?
Right. I mean, if I collected a tooth somewhere, and and it was contemporary, it wasn't a fossilized tooth, and it was huge. That's evidence. That's physical evidence. They'd have to answer where did it come from? What kind of animal made it?
Yeah, well, you remember Rick, Dr. Daryl Lowenstein,
No.
University of San Francisco, when he looked at those DNA samples sent to him, one from Colorado and one from the late Bob Titmus. He said, well, of course, back then in the mid-'90s, he had to grind up the samples because that was the way they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and said, well, it reacts positively with human and reacts positively with chimpanzees. So we either got a human running around out here with very odd problems, or someone's released a chimpanzee with very odd problems, or we got something new that's similar to both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rick, go ahead.
When we found the Skookum cast, or the Skookum impression, we left out fruit, and there was a lot of remains of that fruit that fell out of the mouth or whatever was eating it, and there was a lot of dentition marks in there, or it could have been finger marks. I'm not sure, but this is a cast of one of those, and it sort of looks like it could either be a big finger or a tooth that went down in and ate it. This was the cast that Meldrum made out of the apple bits that were left. It's huge compared to anything that we're used to. It's not canine. It's not, like a carnivore's tooth.
Yeah, it's not a biter, more like a grinder, like a cow or some kind of cattle.
Like an elk?
Or it could be a finger. I don't know. But that's a type of evidence that you got to look at. And I think that the FBI has got this stuff down pat. If you study how the FBI goes about solving a case, they really have, they solve them really quick a lot of times, most of the time, compared to regular police. They go right to the source. They know what is evidence, what isn't evidence. They throw the stuff that isn't evidence. That's just dirty. That's just noise in the system. Get rid of it, and go for that evidence. Anyway,
just a quick question, Rick. That tooth sample or that casting that you have, is it clean enough that you could compare it against Giganto teeth or anything like that?
No, the teeth that Giganto that they had, most of them are ground up. They didn't have a lot because they called it dragon teeth, and they thought it was had medicinal properties. And I've always thought that, if someone want to do some library research, they should be researching when the old gold miners used to use a lot of Asian miners in these rivers to dredge and dig and stuff. Because if they find stuff like that, teeth, they're going to grind it up and sell it as medicinal. They're not going to keep it around for some scientists to look at. And so if there was any evidence close to home with teeth, that's probably that might be what happened to it. But I don't know if the question was about this tooth or about this impression. What?
Yeah, just has it been compared to any of the existing Giganto tooths to see if there was any similar structure or anything like that?
That I don't know. Meldrum gave it to me, and he said that he compared it to everything he knew, and he couldn't identify it.
Well, I'm sure he would think of that.
Yeah.
So, Rick, tell us.
That's the problem. There's too many people in this now. There's a lot of noise. Okay, if I could show you a whole bunch of tracks that were just recently found, and they all look great, but they're questionable because there's just too many people out there now that have access to the little nuances that we look for in some of this stuff. It's like the world's news cycle. We find out stuff happening halfway around the world a lot sooner than we did, back when this all started. And it has a detrimental effect a lot of times on things. And I think that's having an effect on us, is that we are getting a lot of noise in this research.
That and the fact that the internet is a soapbox for every snake oil salesman out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because any one of us and probably 1,000 others on this continent alone could fake a track based upon the information that's readily available and take a cast of it. And I think we see that all the time, and on some of these larger, Bigfoot channels or Sasquatch channels that are obviously there for the money, the views, and that they're seeing, they're getting evidence every time they go out. I mean, some of it is nonsense, of course, that, they're seeing stuff and pareidolia and things like that. But I think there's a phenomenal amount of hoaxing going on in some of those, and it would be really hard to disprove their evidence just because there is so much information out there.
Tell me something, Thomas. Do you long for the good old days when the only woo you had to worry about was Eric Beckshard?
Well, he was the granddaddy of the woo.
Well,
yeah, but there was only a few, but there were a lot fewer people, period, involved in this. And when you communicated, you either had to pay outrageous long-distance calls, or, for instance, if I was going to talk to Rick about something, I'd write a letter. It would take a week and a half to get to him. He'd have to read it, reply, and it would take a week and a half to get back. That's just the way it was, yeah. So in a lot of ways, this is much better, but in a lot of ways, it's the worst thing. The internet's the worst thing that ever happened to this. Yeah, that's
when Bigfooting or Sasquatching had a romantic side to it. Where you could wait for those 3-week-long messages to your single one-line question and wait a month to get a reply. And if there was a picture in the mail, woo! Jumping up and down at the mailbox. Yeah.
We could channel Rene a little bit here and say...
oh, no. No.
I'm not going to imitate him, but
never imitate Rene.
Yeah, gold miners are doing the same sort of thing. They, in order to keep people, the amateurs away from the good areas of gold prospecting, they made little parks and said, come on in and you can camp and bring your family and we'll show you how to pan for gold in this area, and it's only going to be $50, that you camp here. And that keeps them out of their hair out in the real mining areas.
And they make a buck doing it.
Yeah.
Win-win.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's what some of these organizations are really doing, like the BFRO. Maybe they're doing these little things and saying, hey, we can make some money on the side, but we're keeping them away from our good areas.
Well, you were a member of the BFRO for many, many years, Rick. Was that their operas operandi?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I know that the process that went with the Skookum expedition was just ridiculous on the selection of people, and I don't see them doing that now.
Haven't there a standard? I wanted to get into this a little bit later on, but seeing it was brought up now, they've been accused of their standards rather dipsy-doodling over the years, about what is good evidence and what isn't good evidence. If you remember when Bigfoot forums first opened, there was quite a few ex-BFRO members who would post there. Disgruntled, shall we say, BFRO employees. And it seems like that went by the wayside, and 10 years later, another wave of disgruntled field agents quit the BFRO. And it always seems to come down from the top what Moneymaker's flavor of the day is. I suppose that people can follow his instructions that well. I just always found it hard when they would claim to be the only scientific group in the world investigating the Bigfoot mystery, because I never found them. Listen, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great people in the BFRO, a lot of excellent number one people. But I always found it just left a bad taste in my mouth every time a new story would come out about, mainly from the top, from Moneymaker and his plans and everything. And especially the past few years where the bar has seemed to just dropped on the floor of what is evidence and what isn't evidence. We had our own experience with that, with the moose track that Moneymaker declared the find of the year, 2021. Give me a break. Our guy solved it in about 3 hours. And he would be here tonight, except he's in hospital at the moment. But I don't know. It's and these are the go-to organizations for people newly coming in to Bigfoot and Sasquatch research. So I think that's what ticks me off the most, because these podcasts are generally aimed at the newer investigator or researcher and how to avoid the pitfalls that we all fell for over the years ourselves.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick. The BFRO started, 1995?
Well, I wasn't there in the very beginning. I joined 97, 98.
Okay, yeah.
So
now it started off. It was supposed to be just an organization that had people all over the place, independent researchers who were members, and the idea was if something was reported in this particular area, they'd have someone in the vicinity to go look into it.
Originally, yes.
Originally.
Then we got the Flats database.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a poor database, but they wanted everybody to feed into it information that they collected or that they had, and have one repository and maybe get something out of it. So I wouldn't say that the BFRO is the only or the first scientific organization looking for Bigfoot. They're not. They should never have said anything like that, because it was Oh, the one that actually had the periodicals. I forget the name of it now, but
Oh,
California Bigfoot Organization.
no, this is after that. Anyway, Meldrum was part of that, and that was
yeah. NASA.
maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, he's the first digital organization, I would say. He's the first person to ever get on the internet and use it as a research tool, gathering information and communicating almost instantaneously with people. That's the only claim I would say that they have. And as far as the evidence that you guys have seen, and that the BFRO has either said the neon or classified it as A, B, C, or whatever they do. I never even listen to that stuff anymore, because first of all, the definitions that they have for their classification of evidence is not logical at all. I don't know where they came up with this stuff. It's if you had a referee on the side of a football game using the terms and the stuff that they are coming with as how to organize this information, nobody had watched the game again, because it's just ridiculous. What a Class A sighting is compared to a Class B or a Class C. They didn't think about this at all, and we had a lot of internal arguments about that. I think one of the things that I always felt really strongly about was that we should be rating, looking at this differently. That first of all, it's two things that is happening: a human and a Sasquatch come together for some reason, and you should be looking at why that would be by collecting all the information about it. What kind of clothes, what kind of the time of year, what the activity was what kind of noise levels were there, what kind of influence of the area, what's the area like. They don't collect any of that. And the other thing that they didn't do was look at the sightings. Was it how long was the sighting that they had? Was it 10 seconds? Was it 2 days long? Did they see it twice? Did they see it this day and the following day? Did they see it at night? Did they, and then did they see it in the morning too, in regular light? Did they see it under different lighting conditions, or is it just something that was fleeting? Because I've seen a lot of fleeting things myself, and I never claimed that they're Bigfoot. Although a lot of people have asked me, you better come up and tell people that that's Bigfoot.
Mm-mm.
And that's what I saw.
Mm-mm.
So anyway, that's the BFRO. I don't know, if it ever dies and years later someone writes a book about the BFRO, I think there would be a lot of things like that in it versus these what was that moments.
Rick, all the years that you've been into this and are still into it, you've never written a book about it or anything like that?
I've tried. I've started a book, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and it's different. It's not like one of those books where you just be listing a bunch of things that a bunch of people seeing something or finding footprints or something like that, but more about, this is something that there's no proof exists. So what kind of proof can I get, and what would be that proof as I'm going along? And it would be more on the logic and my my journey through it, sort of like what. Well, I hate to, the butterfly guy when he wrote his book. I thought it would be a lot better than that, but it was more of a joke. If you ask me.
Well, I think he talked about Sasquatch about 5 pages.
Yeah. And then there's a movie on it. Did you guys know about that? Did you see it?
Apparently, yeah. I heard it was in the making. I didn't know it was released.
Yeah, it's on the internet. You can watch it on the internet, on YouTube, I guess. And it's, but anyway, what kind of book would there be? You don't want something that's already been done.
And Lord knows everything's been done over and over.
Well, hell, I've done it 3 times. They're all basically the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the one of the freshest books to come out since John Green's, I would say, would be Rob Alley's. And Rob Alley's was interesting to me when I read it, but it was basically the same storytelling stuff. But it was from an area.
Was that the Alaska?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that guy's book.
Yeah.
Raincoast Sasquatch.
Raincoast Sasquatch.
Yeah.
I like Bindernagel's first book because he tied a lot of behavior into it and explained that this behavior is not unprecedented. It does happen with other animals. Now, why? That's what I'm interested in. When behavior is apparent and you are observing it and you don't know why, that's what's fascinating, is to figure out, why would an animal want to do something like this? Or why would a human do this? Or why would that happen? Because the only reason that stuff like that does happen, that the people learn how to do that, or animals learn how to do that, is that it's got an evolutionary advantage. It makes them survive better. And to understand that, all of a sudden you start seeing where there could be a nexus where you could meet up with one. Mm-hmm. You can find something that is very important to an animal and cross over at that spot and see it. And hunters do that all the time.
Now, you spent a lot of time at the Seattle Zoo, didn't you?
Yes.
Looking at the gorillas and watching their behavior.
Yeah.
Did you get anything, anything out of that with regards to their behavior?
Yeah, they don't like the pheromone chips.
Oh.
So I tested them out there to see what they would do, because it was supposed to, Dr. Bamenek claimed to have these chips made from female estrus cycles in gorillas. And they became agitated. But I don't know if all the times I've used them, if it had any effect. But I've noticed some of the behavior, how they would sit on the ground to eat, how they, the economy of energy that they exerted when they were just doing their day-to-day activity, when they move from point A to point B, when they grab some food, when they hide it from another animal, when they bluff, when they look at something and try to when they stare at you through the glass or through the cage, it isn't with intelligence. It's with like awe. It's more like, I don't understand what you are, and you're fascinating to look at. But it's not intelligence.
So who's studying who?
Yeah, it's not like, how can I get at your neck? It's not like that.
Come closer.
Yeah. So that, I got that from going to the zoo a lot, and it also it built up a search image. Okay, when I lose my keys, I think of my keys. I think of how they felt in my hand, where I the last time I used them, where they could sit and be hidden in shadow. What area is small enough to hide my keys, and that's what I look for. And invariably I find them.
Do you tell us about your possible sighting, which happened not too far from where we live right here? The three of us.
Lockheed Highway.
You're talking about
the legs.
Yeah. That's well, we were up in my wife and I and Shelley and another her boyfriend at the time. We're camping at a cabin up there on Long Lake, I guess it's called, at the head, close to the glacier part of Harrison. It was way up there. And when we came back, we were coming into town, and I don't know where we were going, but we were just passing where the BC bus driver claimed to have seen a Bigfoot years before.
Lake of Rock, Lougheed Highway, Route 7,
And it was downpouring. It was just coming down really sheeting. And I was only, I don't know, maybe 50 feet in back of the guy that was driving. He was driving a Samurai 4-wheel drive, and I had I forget the car I was driving. Must have been a 4Runner. Anyway, in between us, I saw something walk right across the road, like it had pants, because it was shaggy. It didn't move like muscles. It didn't, it wasn't, and it wasn't short. They were long, and the headlights only went up so high. And I slammed on the brakes and got on the radio and called the guy in front of me, and he stopped. We came back. I don't know what it was, but it could have been a shadow, as far as I know. Maybe something flew across the road, because it was windy, it was blowing, and it was downpouring rain, and it could have been a branch. I've seen branches come down from trees and fly across, and it looks like something ran out in front of you. Mm-hmm. But that's that. I mean, the other time that something happened was I was coming back from the Skookum area with Highcheck, who was in the back in another vehicle, and I slammed on the brakes because something flew right in front of me, or not. It did fly in front of me because it was a crow, but it didn't look like a crow when I was looking, because I was looking way past it on the road. And when it flew across, it looked like it was walking across the road. With your eyes unfocused closer to you, you were focused further away. And I go, what the heck was that? And then Doug just kept on asking me over and over and over what it was. And I said, I don't think it was a Bigfoot, but it was something. And I thought it was walking across the road, but I'm sure it was a crow that just flew across in front of me. I've had an owl do the same thing. But the owl is different, because when it comes at you, it has its claws out like this, and that's all you're seeing, and it's coming up towards the screen. It's coming up towards my windshield and almost hit it. That happened. The cougar that jumped out when we were on the set for that Giganto, that was we got off our horses. We went under these trees that were down, and I got the horse to come over the tree, and the other guy did too. We got back on our horse. I gave him my camera, and I got up on the horse, and I put my camera underneath my arm, and I was getting settled. We were still wet because we crossed the river up to our waist in water in that river, and so it was kind of chafing on us. Everything was chafing. And we started going, and there's this rock cliff on the side, on the right side of us, and something jumped down right in front of us, right over our heads, and landed in the road. The horses didn't do a thing. They were trained, I guess, to not act like that, but they didn't rear up or anything like that. But I was rearing back, not knowing what it was, and then it stopped right in the road, and all you saw was its butt and the tail.
Yeah.
And it jumped again, and it was gone in the woods. And that was a big cat. It was weird. I've never seen one like that.
These encounters happen so quickly. So
Rick, do you remember when you and I were together on Vancouver Island for that Monster Quest episode when we had the thermal hit?
Yes.
on the trail. It's something behind us, and it left a heat impression on a tree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still
See,
wondering about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of things. That's what thermal or night vision, that kind of stuff. That's good for detection. It's not going to be good for any proof of something.
No, because to the average public, it just looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost on a dark screen.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about that was the next day, you and I, you found it first, was a possible track along that same path just after that old rickety bridge.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that was interesting out there. I don't know if I'd want to camp out on that island again with all the bears and everything, but I swear there was a bear right up on that hill, right next to where we had our fire.
I got about a half dozen castings behind me here, none of which I took. And I got a half dozen. How many do you have, Rick?
Last count was 60.
60.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us a bit about your casting method?
Well,
now, various people have described it various ways. I'd like to hear it from you.
I think it's the best one I've ever seen, Rick. I'd call B11. Do you still use that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a lot of fine detail that can be in an impression. And so you got to really examine what you are casting and determine how you're going to cast it, reproduce it. So if it has detail in there that you don't know what it is until you capture it and can study it a little bit better, then you want to be very, very cautious of putting something heavy in there. And so that's when I do a splash cast. You do the splash, and then they do what's called a French cast after that. So you let it drip off your fingers. It's really wet, and it's like you're making a thin eggshell or like a chocolate covering over a piece of fruit. It's really, really delicate, but it's not going to weight down and destroy anything that's little peaks and ridges and stuff that might be possible in there. It also captures hair. So it's really kind of nice. If there's hair in there, don't worry about picking it out, But if there's leaves and needles and stuff like that in there, that's a problem. Now, I have sometimes not removed them, but I have burnt stuff with a little torch trying to get it out of there and turn it into ash. And that way it's not going to destroy something. There might be something underneath it that I want to cap.
What's your mixing ratio for that? Your mixing ratio?
Usually it's two-thirds plaster to 1/3. I mean, 2/3 water to 1/3 plaster. And but when you do your splash cast, it's supposed to be really wet. It's more like a milkshake, wet milkshake, one that's been melted out in the sun. It's not like milk, but it's a little bit thicker than milk. And it's not like ice cream. It's like milk and ice cream melted. So it's a little thick, but not too thick. And then you let it drip off and into the cast, and you make sure that there's no little areas where you could not see the white of the plaster. And then you let that, it'll frost over, it looks like. It gets dull. And that's when the moisture comes out, and it's still able to adhere to another layer of plaster. It'll set up on it really good. But it is now hardened enough that it's not going to destroy anything. And if it does crack with the weight of the next batch of plaster, the details underneath it are still there. It still has got that. So I carry around at least 3 buckets, 2.5 gallon buckets with a lid, and there's gloves in there because plaster has caustic material in there that if you leave it on your hands long enough, it's a base, will start like lye, it'll start dissolving, like
Mhm.
potassium.
You mean hydrocal, not plaster of Paris.
Well, I call it all plaster, but it's hydrocal, yeah.
Yeah.
B11, yeah. So there's also densite. Densite's a little bit different. Densite looks a lot better. It's a lot stronger, but it's more brittle. So you tap it, and it'll shatter like glass. Hydrocal is more like plaster of Paris, but stronger. And plaster of Paris can rub off like chalk. You can rub it enough with just your fingers, and your finger will act like sandpaper on it. The Skookum cast took quite a bit. It took my 3, and then I brought 2 50-pound bags, one for Leroy, and the other one was for, I think, Jeff Lemley. And they wanted to make up kits just like me with 2.5-gallon buckets full of this stuff, and just leave them in the car whenever you need them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really get a good cast if you just have like a water bottle full of plaster. That's not enough. It's just not enough. And you can't put things in it. If you put sticks and stuff like that in it, it's
To brace it, yeah.
rot. Yeah, it's just going to make it out like honeycomb, and then it'll break apart. So inside of the buckets, I also put wire ties. You can buy a bundle of them in a little plastic thing at one of these box stores, and it's a aluminum tie that goes up and then hooks, and that's it. And then you just put 1 or 2 of those inside of it, and that will really strengthen it up. Aluminum is pretty good inside that hydrocal. Hydrocal really gets rid of the water after a while. You can also bake it afterwards. Plaster of Paris, not so much. It's still permeable, and that aluminum will start corroding, and then it'll break apart. Densite, you usually use steel to reinforce it inside there. I didn't have that on the Skookum. I had to use my tent poles, and they were, the types where they weren't the types where they spring up and they had the cords in them. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
These were the ones where you put them together, and
Oh, that's old school.
yeah. And so I had those, and I put a big X in that from corner to corner, and determining what you're going to cast, you really have to. I prefer a second opinion, and on the Skookum, I missed an area because it was just we didn't have enough, but it was the scrape marks. Either it was fingers or it could have been antlers, but it looked more like fingers than antlers. And outside of that was where the pile of fruit was.
Mm-hmm.
And so we weren't able to get those scrape marks. But the arm section with this line right here, that line, and the heels and the possible footprint that was right next to it. Because I have some pictures where it shows what looks like the footprint that's next to the heel, and the heels destroyed part of the footprint so that it looks like it's only a couple of toes. But then there's another spot over that looks like it was a footprint, and then something knelt in it, like a knee went in and sat on some of it. And the hair pattern on both of them, I don't know, Meldrum was the expert on that. I left it up to them to figure out what it was. All I did was capture the evidence.
Did you get any DNA samples out of that?
There was
Or possible?
there was 3 sets of hairs that we collected, and there was about 15 hairs in each of the samples. And we gave 1 set to Henner, and so the sets, I got a set, Fish got a set, and Derek Randall's got a set. And Leroy, I believe, gave his set to Henner, and also worked with Henner on mounting them. And Henner said that there was one in there that was not bare, or ungulate, and matched his other stuff. So there was no DNA at that time. There was just comparative optical comparison.
Oh, I see.
So on that, you look at the medulla inside, if it's missing, and also, was it cut hair on the end, or was it frayed, or was it tapered? And these were frayed. So it was like it was worn. It's been out there a while. It wasn't something new, like someone just bought a chamois that still had fur on it, went out there and laid it down and put their knee on it, and then lifted it back out and left. So
are you still doing extended field trips?
Yeah, I keep whatever I'm doing pretty much to myself, so I don't get noise.
Do you still have a general research area that you stick to?
Well, I'm not. The areas
don't reveal it. Just yes or no.
The areas are not like they used to be that I have. It's more of the types of areas. And so I'm looking for specific types of areas. And when I find those, that's when I go there, and I keep on going there, but I go at specific times. And the negative data is just as important to me as the positive data. When I had a study site out like on the Seattle, I was collecting both all the negative data and the positive data until there was a bunch of other people coming out, and they would go and not tell me anything, so I didn't get negative or positive data. And so now I'm finding out later some of these stories that are coming out, and it's just noise with my information. I don't know if it's the same stuff that I was finding, or if it was duplicate, or if it was something completely different, or what. And so you've got to kind of, that's why I said there's like too many people in this now. Is that too many hands in the soup?
Well, Rick, just to make it a bit more complicated, we're going to talk a little bit of how they can get into that soup. So basically, you've got water, you've got shelter, and you've got food. Now, does this enhance the possibility of a Sasquatch sighting? If you got all three of those things together, as opposed to any other kind of terrain or...
Well, I'm looking at, like I said before, the reason why. Why would an animal be in a specific spot? Why do you find an elk in a specific spot? Why do you find a cougar in a specific spot? What kind of characteristics are you looking for in an area where you can have these encounters? And if you look at the ones that are fleeting, where you just see it crossing the road, or that basically that's it. Crossing the road. Most humans that see one of these, it's crossing a road, right? It's not. They're not out in the woods hiking and seeing one, unless you're an basketball player that was going to the bathroom. But
you gotta go.
Yeah, I would say most of the time it is crossing the road that someone says that they see something, and that isn't a very good behavior. There's just roads all over the place, and animals cross them all the time. That are really, really important to me are the ones that there's a reason behind the encounter. There's something there, something specific that has been reported and is cropping up in other encounters, and that the encounter lasts longer than just a few seconds. It's something.
Glimpse.
Yeah, it's more than a glimpse. It's more. It's got some length to it that someone is not mistaken as what they saw. And so, like the sixes, this thing happened there several times. That's good. Something happened. I'm also looking where there's researchers. I think it's very important that you have a map that shows you all the researchers that are active in the area. So like for Washington, you can have all these little pinpoints, and there's these pinpoints of these active researchers. You'll find that, or I find actually, that there's a lot of activities that's getting reported around those and nowhere else. Well, I try and stay away from those areas where the people are
tripping over each other's feet. Yeah.
Well, where the researchers are, is that's where a lot of noise comes from in my mind. So I'm looking at those types of sightings or reports that have some length to them and some real meat to their story that gives me some attributes to look at and match it up with other areas. And so I don't have a specific area anymore. I have multiple areas that when I do a little bit of research on a sighting and find out, like in the Sixes, these, have you guys ever, anything about the Sixes rivers down there in Oregon? Other than the stories, it's a very, very narrow canyon. Looks a lot like the Seattle, and where this happened, the miners were killed, and where the two individuals came out and said that they saw this creature there, and it was very aggressive. There's not going to be an elk in there. There's not going to be any calving going on. There's not what kind of food in there, I don't know. But it's very, very steep and rugged and very, very hard to get into. It's not easy.
That was back in the 1890s, wasn't it, when the miners were killed?
Yeah. And there's still no road into that area. There's a road going all the way around it, but not into where Hell's Gate was, and a couple of places inside there where it is. But the graves are still there for the miners. It's a national cemetery, or a state cemetery, they called it. And so there's some areas like that that are very, very inaccessible up in the Seattle as well. And I don't know if a lot of other people weren't really paying attention to what I was doing up there until they saw it on TV. But the Seattle had some areas where people were disappearing. And these people were disappearing not, really regularly, but they were experienced people, and they were going into a specific area that had a lot of fissures and pockets and boulders and stuff that were grown over, but there were pockets where the vegetation was the only thing going over the holes, and they could fall down in and actually get lost really easy. And there was a couple of famous people that got lost up in there in the Illibot. And then it's also volcanic. But the Sixes really looks like that, and there's a couple of places on the peninsula that really look like that as well. And I haven't found stuff like what Derek over on the peninsula has found, which is they're claiming that they found these nests looking kind of things. But Owen Caddy and we found some stuff with the shoot meadows. Those are really popular hunting grounds for gorillas in Africa. On the mountain slopes, as they call them, shoot meadows, because it's a shoot of that goes down the side of a mountain, and the animals crawl up them because it just wipes away everything, and then the first things that grow in there are the things that they like to eat, and they just call them a shoot meadow, I guess. So
do you think that the Bigfoot just in their eyes just find people an annoyance? I mean, I don't see people's presence in many reports that are changing how do I say it? like whatever the Bigfoot or Sasquatch was doing at the time it was observed, very few of them changed their pattern. They either carry on with what they were doing, whether that's eating berries or whatever, like on Micah Mountain, or they walk across roads, they hear a vehicle coming or something. Yes, they will stop. They will wait for that vehicle to go by, then they will cross the road. Hence, I think that they look at us as just a necessary annoyance they have to put up with every now and then. They're not afraid of us, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think they're afraid of us, except for if it depends on the activity that they're doing. Like if they were, if it was food that they were gathering, or if it was their mating, or if they were rearing their young, where they want to feel safe. If they were just traversing an area, it would be, which is when I think they have an encounter with us, is when they're traversing an area. They're not really in their home range, like Otzman's story.
Well, yeah, okay.
That's a totally different kind of thing. But most of them are they're going from point A to point B, or
Yes.
that's simplistic, but they're just traveling. And I think,
Like I guess you could say if one of them was walking along and saw you, would it turn around and go back the other way to avoid you? Possibly, but the only ones that we see are the ones who don't turn around and go back the other way.
Well, it's like what I said before. I think the Parrish and Gimlin encounter in '67 was, if those horses hadn't reacted, they may have ridden right on by or never been the wiser.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If they didn't have horses and they were on foot,
Yep.
they may not have even seen her.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so to her, it's just a matter of stay still. They'll pass on by, ignore them, kind of thing. They're a necessary nuisance.
And
Micah Mountain. There's an example right there up on the Yellowhead, where he observed this female for 20 minutes or something, eating berries.
William Rowe.
20 minutes or more while she ate berries, until she started to get annoyed with him and barked at him a couple of times, and then turned and walked off in a huff. So I mean, she wasn't afraid of him.
I think you can see. Go ahead, Thomas.
No, sorry, Bill. I was saying the William Rowe it's one of the few I ever heard, and it's one of the classics. A few instances I ever heard where a person was able to observe one, and it didn't seem to know that somebody was there. And when it did spot him, William described the look on its face as almost comical. It was so shocked to see him there. Yeah.
But I think we have a parallel in known animals. If you look on trail cameras in Banff National Park, and you've also got it in the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska, where they have grizzly bears walking along regular footpaths that have tourists on them, and they've got video showing the grizzly bear walking down the footpath, hears people, they step off the trail a couple of feet, the people walk by without even seeing them, and then the grizzly bear gets back on the trail and continues on the way. And I think you may have, if Sasquatch exists, you may get similar behavior to that, where they're walking, because all animals are lazy. If there's a nice path, they'll take it. So if they're walking down a path and they hear us or see us first, they might just step off the trail a couple of feet, wait for us to go by, and then carry on about their business.
Yeah, and I've had so many witnesses tell me it was standing so still they hadn't looked right at it. They never would have known it was there.
Well,
So
that's the
that
fight
leads
or
up-
flight.
Go ahead,
What do you think the eyesight of these creatures are?
Mhm.
Is it like a bear's, like a cat's? Is it meaning good or nearsighted or farsighted, or is it like ours where we can see, pretty good at all those distances?
Where everybody has a different opinion on that one. Let's not get into eye shine and all the rest.
Not
It's,
that. Not that, but I'm thinking, like, did you see Grizzly Man? with Timothy Treadwell.
Yes.
He had a bear come right up in back of him while he was filming and stood up because he couldn't see what was going on,
right.
but he heard stuff.
That's right.
A Sasquatch doesn't do that. It's never done that. So it must. I think Sasquatch can see pretty good. I don't think it can smell as good as it can see. So animals, if it's standing upright, most people might not even notice that it's a Sasquatch. It could be just a couple of people walking, further down the shoreline and not recognize anything different. It's on 4 feet. Yeah, I'd recognize it, but it was within 4 feet of them. Wow.
Yeah. I must dig that. I lent it to someone. I never got it back, so I had to buy it again.
Yeah.
So, I must dig through that, get it off the bookshelf and dig through. So you're a technical kind of guy, aren't you there?
Yeah.
What do you think of using drones for trackways and such?
For trackways?
Yeah. For following trackways or what have you?
They're okay, but the photography with that isn't really good for close-up views of tracks. It'd be okay to try and maybe be 10, 15 feet off the ground and follow a track line, but I don't know about following that with something like that versus using the drone for other reasons. What other reasons would I use a drone for? Well, I would.
Recce.
For what?
A recce, or as you Americans call it, a recon.
A recon? Yeah, you could do that, but they have ones out now that are that follow you. You have a tag or you have a wrist thing, and you could put it on a dog, and it could follow the dog and have the dog go running around. Yeah, stuff like that. But they're pretty noisy. I know that. I have one, and they're pretty noisy.
When you get to a certain height, though, and then you can't hear them anymore. It's of course it depends on the size of the drone too.
Yeah. I think they're good for going along, exploring rivers and stuff in the banks just to see if there's something there. Saves you 2 hours of hiking to check out that sandbank halfway down the creek when you can see if there's something there to look at in the first place.
Yeah.
For tracks and stuff. Yeah.
My fascination is inside of berry patches. There's a lot of animals that actually there's a couple of encounters down there in the Sixes where they said that they saw these creatures going in and out of berry patches and climbing underneath, and like they dug out to get rid of get away from the stickers and everything, but they were living on apparently underneath these big berry patches. And the Indians, the Native Americans, were saying the same sort of thing, that they shared the berry patches with these creatures. So it's an inaccessible place. It's protected with those thorns. So I don't know. I would use a pole with a camera on it for something like that.
Yeah, I have one of those. So does Thomas.
Yeah, so I would, for a thing that you could do is you could do a zip line camera and put it in the forest, set one up, and just have it going back and forth while you're in the area. Well, yeah, I don't know if it'd flush out or you just capture it at some point, because cameras see a cone. And not unless you get a 360 camera, and those are not the best. Although now the new the new GoPros that are 360, they have a camera hemisphere on each side of the camera, or each side of the device. those are kind of interesting, but still, what is photography going to do? Is it going to prove that
No.
they really exist?
I think it should only be a tool for giving you extra evidence, not proving it to anybody. You're not going to prove anything with a drone, no matter what you film.
Right.
But I think it can be just another tool that you can use,
Right.
while you're out there looking, just like a pair of binoculars or anything else, or a measuring tape or what have you. It's just another tool.
So-
You may remember, Rick, we set up a lot of your trip cameras when we were out on Vancouver Island, and you had your little styrofoam rock covering, camouflaging it and all that.
Yeah.
And the only thing I didn't like about the finish of the episode, that the very last scene is you and me examining the footage, and they almost tried to make it look like we had something there in the dark, when I am totally convinced that what that camera was filming was me coming to check it in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that. They had me go out and check it. When they came back, they said, okay, nothing happened to you. Now can you do it again while we film it?
Right.
I think shooting Sasquatch is illegal in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking
Yeah, so-
of which, Rick, are you still armed when you go out into the bush?
Yes. I am armed all the time. I have usually a handgun, but I also have the 45-70.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Yeah, that'll stop anything.
Well,
Too late.
I don't know.
Poorly.
I hope so.
We'll let you test it out and see how it works.
It's a single shot, so it's not like,
You better be good then.
yeah. It's a breechless, so I'd have to, it's a little tough reloading.
Yeah, see, we're backward up here. We're not allowed to carry firearms into the woods unless you live some godforsaken place that you can only get to by airplane or something like that. Then
Well,
you can have
handguns,
a special
you can.
license.
Yeah.
Yes, a handgun. Then you can get a special license to carry a handgun. Otherwise, forget it. So,
Yeah.
Well, we have the
Doesn't matter.
advantage here that I can carry a short-barreled rifle, where in the U.S. they need a special tax stamp for it. So, there's pros and cons, though. I think you down south have a lot more pros than cons when it comes to comparing to Canada.
Yeah, I have a concealed weapons permit for almost every state in the United States, and I carry it all the time in the different states that I go to.
I'm just trying to hold on to the guns I got before the government comes and takes them,
Yeah,
which they are planning on doing.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
maybe as soon as the end of this year. Maybe.
Well,
as soon.
Look at the Ukraine. It's they're handing them out.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, when
Hey,
a
it's
foreign
a
army
wonder-
invades, that happens.
It's a wonder that our Prime Minister Trudeau hasn't come up with the idea, let's take the guns from the legal gun owners and send them over to the Ukrainians. Everybody will be happy and I'll get reelected again. He hasn't thought of that yet. If he thought of it, he would. Yeah. So tell me something. We're running up, where are we here? Let me look. We're running up to the hour and a half mark now at the moment. Can I ask each one of you, including myself, one last question? And that is, once bitten by the Sasquatch or Bigfoot bug, is there ever going back? What do you think? Is it ever going back? Is the day going to come when you say, I had enough of this? I've shot my shot. Time to move on to something else. What do you think, Rick?
I've done that a couple of times. I've stepped
We all
away,
have.
and it gives you a different perspective. When you step away, you go, "I'm looking at this wrong because it's not working." So what do I do? What do I, And it's a good way of just, making sure you're still on a path, going somewhere, instead of all of a sudden waking up and you're in the bushes.
Yeah.
So I think it's good, and I do that, but you keep coming back to it.
I think that's the important part, is that you keep coming back. I left it too for about 6 years. Never read anything, never watched anything, never talked to anyone about it. But then just when you think you're out, they pull you back in again. Yeah. What about you, Bill?
I think, and I was fortunate enough that Thomas introduced me to John Green a number of years ago, and I asked the same question to John Green, and I think he had the best answer. He says that all of us, we go through different periods of time where in our life where certain things are important. He said, sometimes in his career, his family was the most important thing. He'd stepped back from Sasquatch and he'd focused on his family. Other times, building his career was the most important thing, and he focused on that. And then sometimes Sasquatch. And I think that's what most of us do. Like, when I was younger, I did a lot on Sasquatch. But when I first got married and my kids were young, I focused on the kids, focused on the family life, and I really left Sasquatch for most of it. And then it comes back. And I think, other than some people where it's a consuming passion, I think most of us can put in our life in a healthy perspective where we can step away from it when it's the other things are important in our life, and pull back into it when it fits in. Yeah. And I think that's the healthiest way to do it.
Yeah. And of course, I picked the most unhealthiest way. I started looking in '78, and I've never stopped. I don't have a family, and this is the biggest reason why I don't. And the only time I ever stopped in all those years was when I did my military service, and I had to do other things for a little while. Yeah. But when we had our own time off, most of the guys, their party was alcohol and chasing women. Me, I went in the bush looking for Sasquatch, and I was the weird one.
And you never became an alcoholic?
No. As a matter of fact, I vowed to never drink again, and after New Year's Eve 1989, I'd never broken it.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it, I'm in my late 60s. I have no thoughts of this mystery being solved before I croak. It hasn't been solved in 50 years. It ain't going to be solved in the next 15 or 20.
But if it is solved and becomes everyday zoology rather than cryptozoology, I'd be more than happy to give it all up, hand my stuff off to any museum that wants it, and go on to something else.
Don't forget to chop the hands and feet off. Put them in a bag. And who are you going to call? Mr. Meldrum. Yeah. And no, it's a fascinating topic, the whole thing. I just love getting back into it again. And I figured, if you're going to get back into it again, be useful instead of doing something for yourself, do something for someone else. And that's why I created these podcasts. And I hope that people who are just getting into this can pay attention and learn something. Even if you walk away with nothing else tonight, you learn that Rick Noll is a great guy and he knows about putting down cast. So write down everything he said. And be careful of the woo. Be careful of the Fifth Estate. We discussed that on another podcast. You can't trust newspaper people. And so, if someone was around pointing all that stuff out 20 years ago, it might have been a different story for me and a bunch of sad other people. But I like it. I like doing this. What gives me passion is talking to the people, talking to you guys. That's what gives me the passion for it. Because I find the people to be just as interesting or even more interesting at times than the animal. And I think we can all agree on that. Like most of our friends, I'm sure, came to us through this. Well, the other ones ran away a long time ago.
My oldest daughter, when she was in university still doing her anthropology, she used to go to our Sasquatch lunches that we used to have, pre-COVID, and she said, she was going to do her master's on the Sasquatch people because she said we were every bit as fascinating as the subject that we were studying, for both good reasons and bad reasons.
Where the hell else can you find a John Green and a Rene Dahinden?
Or a Thomas Steenburg, for that matter.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but.
Never do one of these out kicking me, can you?
John Green, this zoological type, A-type personality, that, thinks it's an ape, it's an animal, nothing more, nothing less. And yet he would be the first one to point, careful what you say about Eric. He's a friend of mine. Speaking of Eric Beckjord. And Thomas Powell. Oh, Thomas writes some pretty good stuff, he told me once. Okay, I'm sure he's a nice man, but I don't exactly follow his policies. And no, made a lot of good friends in this line of endeavor. And it's just too juicy to give up, It's just too juicy. And on that vein, before we go, I would like to just give a shout out to our buddy, pal, and colleague, Leon Thompson, who's in hospital in Kelowna tonight. He's out of the ICU now, and he's on a ward. And
good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, he is in hard shape. He's able to speak. You can understand some of what he says from some people who spoke to him on the telephone. But the boy has a long way to go on recovery. Definitely a long way to go. So we're always missing a seat here every time we do a podcast. Rick, it's been absolutely fantastic having you here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Like I told you before, I wanted you here for a long time, and I'm so glad that you finally came out tonight. I hope you'll drop back.
Sure. Anytime.
We'd love to have you again, man. Like I say, you're one of the go-to icons. You and Thomas, you're honest brokers. I like that. You're honest brokers. You don't have to think twice about motivation and who you are and everything else. You wear it on your sleeve. So, yeah. So that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed the podcast tonight. And Rick Noll, I hope will be back to join us again. As I say, a shout out to Leon and Thomas and Bill. Thank you for coming along tonight and making this a lot more interesting production than it would have been otherwise. And yeah, that's it. Okay, listeners, I hope you enjoyed yourself. And listen, if you enjoy these podcasts, you like these podcasts, go to our YouTube page and hit the subscribe button so we know what we're doing has some kind of value here. Aside from that, God bless, have a good night, and keep on searching. Okay, dear listener, that about wraps it up for now. My name is Jerry Matthews. You can reach me at yellowcoyote@talus.net. Thank you for your interest, and until the next time, keep searching.